In the early 1960s, bigger wasn't just better, it was mandatory. Steel reigned, chrome glistened like armor. These weren't just cars, they were monuments on wheels, stretching past reason and riding like living rooms. Today, we remember the giants, the rolling titans whose sheer size made them unforgettable, unstoppable, and undeniably American. 1960 Cadillac Series 75 limousine. It didn't glide, it prowled. The 1960 Cadillac Series 75 was more than a limousine. It was a steel cathedral on wheels. Measuring over 20 feet long, it demanded space, respect, and an open road to stretch its chrome-plated limbs. Beneath the hood lurked a 390 cubic inch V8, whispering power through a Hydra-matic 4-speed, tuned not for racing, but for ruling. The body was adorned with thin fins, not sharp like the 59, but elegant like royalty aged into grace. Wide white walls hugged the pavement like cufflinks on a tuxedo. Rear passengers didn't sit, they lounged. There was a divider window to seal off the world, thick carpeting underfoot, and air conditioning that hummed like a lullaby for the elite. The silence inside was heavier than its 3 tons. It wasn't absence of noise, it was presence of command. Used by CEOs, diplomats, and the occasional mob boss, the Series 75 wasn't just transportation, it was theater. It turned boulevards into red carpets and parking lots into statements. Its length wasn't vanity, it was a metaphor for status, for American ambition. For a time when limits weren't respected, they were rolled over. And as it idled, the Cadillac didn't purr. It exhaled authority. 1961 Lincoln Continental Executive Limousine. It looked like it belonged at the White House gate or storming past it. The 1961 Lincoln Continental Executive Limousine was a stretched paradox, minimalism sculpted at a monumental scale. Designed under Elwood Engel's clean-sheet vision, its sharp, slab-sided profile stood in direct defiance of the Baroque trends of the 1950s. And yet, it was longer, heavier, and somehow even more commanding. At 21 feet, this limousine wasn't built to maneuver. It was built to arrive. Underneath that endless hood was a 430 cubic inch MEL V8, producing a buttery 315 horsepower. But it wasn't the numbers, it was the sensation. The torque flowed like thick velvet. Acceleration wasn't a lunge, it was a procession. The rear doors opened suicide style, as if welcoming you into a silent opera. The leather inside, cold like confidence. The dash? A brushed metal slab as serious as the Oval Office. This car carried heads of state, captains of industry, and shadows of conspiracy. It was presidential, literally. The Continental would later become the base platform for JFK's motorcade car. When it cruised, it didn't just move, time slowed. Corners bent in its honor. Crowds hushed. Its wheelbase was longer than most today's cars entirely. Its aura, heavier than its 3.5 tons. And in a world obsessed with movement, the Lincoln Continental taught one lesson. True power doesn't need to rush. It simply arrives. Third, 1960 Imperial Crown Convertible. This was Chrysler's rebellion draped in silk. The 1960 Imperial Crown Convertible wasn't just large, it was indulgent. At over 19 feet long and nearly 7 feet wide, it commanded entire lanes like a battleship, with tail fins sharp enough to slice envy into the air. Yet, unlike its competitors, the Imperial wasn't merely grand, it was bizarrely, beautifully defiant. It floated on torsion bars and unfiltered confidence. The 413 cubic inch Golden Lion V8 under the hood didn't roar. It thundered with quiet arrogance, sending 350 horsepower down through a push-button torque-flight automatic. But it was the shape that stole breath. The freestanding headlights looked like jeweled satellites, beaming from chrome pods as if aiming to detach and orbit. The grille was a vertical waterfall, the dashboard, space-age in styling, wrapped around the driver like a cockpit stitched in stitched leather and polished metal. The convertible top? Hydraulic opera, smooth, synchronized, dramatic. And once down, you weren't in a car, you were in a parade float of royal sarcasm. Everything about the Imperial said one thing: we don't follow Detroit's rules, we make new ones. Fewer than 1,000 were built, but each one was a rolling statement. It didn't need validation, it was art that refused to shrink. A king-size jab at convention? And as it passed, the world didn't stare. It gasped. 1960, Buick Electra 225. They called it Deuce and a Quarter, not as a nickname, but a warning. The 1960 Buick Electra 225 measured just a hair under 19 feet. That name? 225 inches of chrome-wrapped confidence. This wasn't a car. It was a cruise ship with tires, and every inch dripped with sculpted arrogance. The body was low and long, with sweeping lines that made it look like it was doing 60 while parked. Massive tailfins sliced through the air, mirrored by twin bomb-shaped taillights that looked like they'd just been ejected from a B-52. Power came from a 401 cubic inch nailhead V8, a torque-hungry monster that delivered 325 horsepower with the sound of distant thunder rolling across asphalt. Press the accelerator, and the nose rose like a boat leaving dock. Inside was an empire of leather and brushed aluminum, a sweeping speedometer that moved like a radar dish. Seats so wide they could fit 3 adults and still leave room for doubt. Power windows, power steering, and enough insulation to silence a protest. It wasn't about agility, the Electra didn't care for turns. It was about presence. And presence can't be measured in skid pad numbers. It was built to be admired, envied, remembered. The Electra 225 wasn't just large, it was legend, pressed into steel. Fifth, 1961, Chrysler New Yorker Town and Country Wagon. It was the suburban titan, a muscle-bound mansion on white walls. The 1961 Chrysler New Yorker Town and Country Wagon was what happened when family needs collided with aerospace dreams. Measuring 18.5 feet, it was longer than some hearses and twice as loud in personality. This wasn't just a wagon, it was a rolling penthouse for 6, wrapped in space-age luxury. It was powered by the 413 cubic inch Wedge V8. This engine didn't hum, it punched. The TorqueFlite transmission wasn't just smooth, it was theatrical. With a push-button gear selector mounted beside the steering wheel, every drive felt like a Cold War missile launch. Tailfins curved like rising smoke. The roofline floated on thin chrome pillars. Wood paneling? Fake, but majestic. Faux ash grain that shimmered under sunlight, telling lies no one dared challenge. Inside, the second row folded flat, the third row faced backwards. Children could watch the world disappear behind them, mile after mile, while their parents glided forward in an American spacecraft. It was overbuilt, overpowered, overstyled, and it didn't apologize for a second of it. June 1962, Mercury Monterey Custom Breezeway. This wasn't just a car, it was a moving lounge with a reverse window and a point to prove. The 1962 Mercury Monterey Custom Breezeway didn't scream luxury, it whispered it through size, shape, and something strangely beautiful. At over 18 feet long and weighing nearly 2 tons, it was a gentle colossus designed for those who wanted their comfort loud but their style quiet. Its most iconic feature? The retractable rear window, angled inward like a question mark carved into steel. It rolled down to allow air to flow through the cabin, a design Mercury called the Breezeway. But it wasn't just a gimmick. It turned every ride into a silent, serene wind tunnel. The engine choices were as robust as the frame, from a 292 cubic inch V8 to the 390 big block. Smooth, understated torque made highway miles feel like gliding through clouds on velvet rollers. The suspension floated, the steering was finger-light, and the body panels stretched so wide you could lose your lunch tray between them. Inside, the Monterey was a living room. Cloth seats with intricate stitchwork, chrome accents on every knob and handle, and a dashboard that glowed like a jukebox in the night. Every detail was designed to feel indulgent, even if you were hauling groceries instead of dreams. It wasn't trying to be a Cadillac or a Lincoln. It didn't need to. The Monterey carved its own lane, wide, quiet, and lined with chrome. And when that rear window dropped and the breeze swept in, you didn't just drive, you exhaled. 7th, 1963, Pontiac Bonneville Safari Wagon. This was muscle disguised as family, a road warrior with luggage space. The 1963 Pontiac Bonneville Safari Wagon stretched over 18 feet long, a monument to American optimism on 4 wheels. It was the chariot of middle-class grandeur, built for long trips, big families, and the kind of driveway presence that made neighbors peek through curtains. But don't let the wood grain siding fool you, this thing was a beast. Under the hood roared the legendary 421 cubic inch Super Duty V8, delivering well over 300 horsepower depending on the spec. When you pressed the gas, the nose lifted and the rear hunkered down like a lion before the pounce. It didn't accelerate, it surged. Yet inside, it was all gentility. Bench seats the size of twin mattresses, a tailgate that swung down like a theater curtain, a roofline that flowed like a flat-top river. The dashboard carried round gauges and elegant dials, softly lit like the glow of a diner jukebox at midnight. And then there was the rear seat, facing backward. A portal to everything you left behind. Kids waved at trailing cars, while adults traded glances with the pass through the wide rear glass. It carried baseball gear, beach towels, and secrets. It smelled like crayons, vinyl, and 1960s freedom. In a Bonneville Safari, you didn't ask, "Are we there yet?" You hoped the road never ended. 1961 Oldsmobile 98 Holiday Coupe. If chrome were a religion, this was its temple. The 1961 Oldsmobile 98 Holiday Coupe was not just big, it was hypnotic. At nearly 19 feet long and over 7 feet wide, it wrapped itself in the kind of mid-century extravagance that felt equal parts spaceship and skyscraper. It looked like it was built for moon landings, not mall parking. Under its vast hood purred the Rocket V8, 394 cubic inches of smooth fury paired to a Hydra-matic drive. The acceleration wasn't explosive, but it didn't need to be. The 98 moved with elegance, as if it already knew it had won the race of attention. The holiday badge wasn't for show. The interior felt like a getaway cabin dressed in brushed aluminum and brocade fabrics. You didn't sit, you reclined. You didn't drive. You floated, shielded by glass that felt endless and a hood that reached the horizon. Chrome trim flowed like rivers. The rear deck extended past logic. The front fenders carried dual headlights like eyes daring the darkness to blink first. And that dashboard, staggered, stylized, saturated in color. Every control felt like part of a control panel from a dream of the future. It wasn't just a car, it was the promise of tomorrow. On white walls. 9th, 1960. Ford Galaxy Starliner aerodynamics met excess in this winged wonder. The 1960 Ford Galaxy Starliner looked like it wanted to leave Earth. With its sloped roofline, jet-inspired tailfins, and wraparound rear glass, it felt like an aircraft that had chosen asphalt over sky. At 17.6 feet long and nearly 7 feet wide, it wasn't just a car, it was a rocket in waiting. The Starliner was low, wide, and planted. It came standard with a 292 cubic inch V8, but could be optioned up to the fierce 352 or even the Thunderbird 390. The performance didn't whisper. It sang, backed by a deep exhaust growl that echoed through canyon highways. Its body shimmered with a simplicity that was ahead of its time. Free of excessive chrome, sculpted with clean lines and a fastback rear window that melted into the trunk like a waterfall of glass. It looked fast while standing still. And when it moved, it slipped through the wind like it belonged there. Inside was a cocoon of mid-century innovation. Starburst patterns on the door panels, a thin, two-spoke steering wheel. Dials sunk deep into the dash like control gauges on a NASA console. The Galaxy Starliner wasn't about hauling families or flaunting size. It was about motion, movement, flight. And when the sun hit its flanks just right, it didn't shine, it lifted. 1961 DeSoto Adventurer. This was the swan song of a dying giant, and it sang in thunder. By 1961, DeSoto was gasping, but its final breath came in the form of a beast, the Adventurer. At 18 feet long and drowning in chrome, this car was more than a last hurrah. It was a muscle-bound goodbye letter written in steel and gasoline. The Adventurer was sculpted aggression. Its front grille was a horizontal scream. Quad headlights glared with defiance. And those tailfins? Not delicate, not restrained. They flared like a middle finger to subtlety. Beneath the hood, a 361 cubic inch V8 pushing out over 265 horsepower, though higher output versions existed in limited numbers. The transmission was the iconic push-button torque flight, responding with buttery vengeance to every command. Inside, it was theater. Brocade seats in bold colors, a dashboard shaped like a control pod, chrome-trimmed everything. You didn't just drive the Adventurer, you operated it like a machine built for glamour and defiance. Only about 911 were made. By the end of 1961, DeSoto was gone. But in that final year, they built one of the boldest, biggest sedans the road had ever seen. It was a final act that didn't whisper away. It roared into legend. These weren't just big cars, they were rolling myths. Machines that filled roads and imaginations alike. In an age when size was the language of status, these giants spoke with thunder. And though their time has passed, their echoes remain, etched into steel, asphalt, and memory, forever loud, forever long.